Hi, I am Kaï Van Lëuven, and this is a Sunday conversation. This Sunday, I sit down with Bishop Nathan Hinckley. Now, I have fanboyed Nathan's content on Facebook for about a year now. His insights are profound, they're deep, they're funny, and I am just so grateful to be able to sit down and talk with Nathan today on Jesus for Mormons. So, Nathan, thanks for coming on Jesus for Mormons. Do you mind telling people a little bit about yourself so they have some context?
Thanks, Kaï. It's great to be here with you. Let me just first say, in this age of fake news, I have some problems with your little thumbnail.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's go to the thumbnail here.
Most interesting expo. Okay, so yeah, I have problems with the most interesting part. You obviously don't know my brother-in-law,
Okay.
but I appreciate that. However, I am actually still Mormon. I'm not Exmo, so
there you
you've
go.
got all kinds of problems on that.
Well, that's true. I guess my name's still on the records.
Well, so there you go.
I hope my state president's not watching this one.
But to tell you a little bit more about myself, so I was born in Utah, but we moved to the South. I live in Tennessee now. You probably can tell from my accent. We grew up. I live in pretty close to the Knoxville area, and come from a long line of Mormons. We are related to Gordon B. Hinckley distantly, but we also go back to pioneers and all that. Of course, I went through all of your typical Mormon things. I did the youth program, the seminary, the Eagle Scout. Met my Mormon girlfriend when I was several months shy of my 16th birthday.
There you go.
And went on a mission. Went to Argentina. Loved my mission. Worked really hard. Loved the language. Loved the food. You ever had Argentine food, Kaï?
I haven't. No.
A lot of meat. A lot of steak.
There you go.
But I came home and we got married 6 weeks after my mission. And let's see, that was in 2000. And then as far as the church goes, we got married in the Atlanta temple, which was the closest temple to us at the time. And not long after that, I got put into the bishopric here in our ward. So we live in a really kind of a small ward. At the time, it was almost like a family ward. So everybody was related to my wife's family.
Oh, okay.
And so kind of a small ward. Now it's actually more of a college ward from a college down the road. But anyways, so anyway, I spent 4 or 5 years in the bishopric under a couple different bishops. And then I was called as bishop in our ward, served for 5 years. I think that was in 2012 or maybe 2011, right in there. Of course, we had 4 kids. And that kind of takes me up until some of the stuff that we're going to talk about. When I was released as bishop, I was on the High Council. One of the things I would say, I come from a musical family. What brought us to Tennessee was my parents played music at different, country music and different venues. They played at, have you heard of Dollywood before?
Oh, I have heard of that. Yeah. Is that a Dolly Parton deal?
Yeah, it's her theme park. So my parents played there as a duo, as a music group for, I don't know, 12 or more years. And then they played a lot of other places, including bars and things like that, even though as Mormon, folks, they never participated much in that or at all in that lifestyle, but they certainly played music. So anyway, I come from a musical background. I also have two brothers that we've had a music group. We used to do some music for EFYs and stuff like that.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of what brought us to Tennessee. When I was on the high council, I was put over music, and I'd go around to each ward with my guitar and play in sacrament meetings. So that's kind of really important to me is the whole music aspect. But that pretty much brings it up to kind of I think what you and I are going to be talking about mostly here tonight.
Yeah. So I think one thing that's really interesting for me as I have looked at your content on Facebook is that you posted about that your last lesson that you taught was January 20th of 2023. Really not that long ago. In the whole scheme of things, being in the church for 40 plus years, you are fairly recently out of it. And leaving the church, there is your religious life, and then there's also this cultural element that affects, both of those kind of work together when you leave the church. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about was this topic that you wrote on called Modesty, Schmodesty. I think that's a good, fun, light topic to kind of start this off with. Do you mind telling us about that and really what you were trying to convey when you were writing about modesty in the Mormon church?
So, yeah, that topic was one of the early on posts that I had made. So I think most of your listeners are familiar with the Mormon church in that we have prophets and apostles, and we consider those people to speak the words of God or the words of Christ. Matter of fact, on my Facebook page, I did a poll here about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I just said, did you understand growing up in the church that our leaders spoke literally with Jesus Christ, and basically yes or no. And over like 95% of everyone said, absolutely, this is what we were taught. This is what I believed when I was in. So you have to talk about any of these topics, you have to understand the mindset of the members. And that is, we take what is being taught as literal counsel from God. And with regards to modesty, so my wife can speak that she was always growing up was very strict on one piece bathing suits, and that's kind of dressing very modestly as a youth, and there's nothing wrong with that. And then, of course, once we go to the temple and we wear the garment, then that takes on a whole other aspect of not showing your shoulders and all that kind of stuff. So anyways, this particular post, I had some family members, and I'd prefer not to call them out by names, but some family members. And here's the point, Kaï. When I post this, a lot of people will comment and say, oh, they shouldn't have said that. But it's not really about that. It's not about, so I had one post of my wife in a bikini. We were at the lake, and I was super, proud of her. She had lost 60 pounds. There you go. Hot little thing, right?
She looks great, man. Congratulations. She looks great.
Yeah, so she lost a lot of weight, and I had posted that picture, and it was actually more of almost like a business aspect. She was coaching on some things, and anyways, a family member had lashed out and said, I could not, I'll quote it, I couldn't see those posts of you in a bikini. You were flaunting to everyone that you weren't living the gospel. And then the other one there in the black dress, just because her shoulders are showing. And that was another similar situation where someone close to us had said, what's happening to our family regarding that picture, because they could tell she wasn't, wearing her garment. So the point of that whole post, I get to in the last line, and this is what I said. I said, I guess my main point is this: members are confused. The church has made rules that hardly anyone follows. Some people do. My wife always did. Therefore, it is a breeding ground for either judgment of one another for what someone decides to wear, or guilt and shame because you're wearing something that you have been told not to. Guilt and shame seem to be in full supply in the church. And if there's anything that's shameful, it's that. So, it just comes down to, a grown woman, first of all, deciding to wear something that most people would still say is very modest.
Sure.
But our church leaders have told us in various ways that it's not. And I just, finally found a voice to, instead of just taking what they say, just having my own voice. Do I feel like this is appropriate? Do I see anything wrong with it? And I don't, especially considering she was at the lake and we were out to dinner, it's just, and so oddly enough, if anyone is following current Mormon, Mormon news, the garment is now getting shorter and shorter, and that black dress my wife is wearing, I think will probably be garment approved now. And
yeah,
so
it will be pretty darn close. And man, you're taking the wind right out of my sails. I was gonna say, you said on here, modest is not the hottest, unless we're talking about how hot you're gonna feel because of the extra fabric. I was gonna say that you are prophetic. And that you front ran that they were gonna change the garments around. Which is kind of a funny thing to think about in hindsight. I'm just going to ask you now, are you a prophet?
Well, I've never claimed to be, but I will tell you this, that since I have found what I would just say a voice, to speak authentically, it feels good. And I see that whether I'm prophesying or not, I don't know, but it feels good to speak what I consider truth, or what you might say, my truth, or whatever.
Yeah. And I think that it's really hard because I remember the garments being a visual check for if someone was living the gospel, which now I look back on and I say, gosh, how can I visually check what is going on in someone's heart? Like, how can I visually see that? And because they dress a certain way, how is that any indicator of whatever relationship or non-relationship they have with God? It's just, I think it's a little bit judgmental, and that's why I really liked this, this modesty schmodesty post that you put out there.
Yeah. About that, Kai, as a bishop, one of the things that I did the most is what we call, we would interview, the members for worthiness, and that's kind of what you were just hitting on. It's like, who am I? Who was I to determine whether they were worthy or not? Well, I have the questions memorized still. Of course, they've changed them slightly, but it was simple yes or no questions. But I really loved what you said. I mean, it's really what's in the heart that matters, not how they answer whether yes or no to these 15 or whatever questions. So, yeah, totally agree with you.
Yeah, and I think the culture, maybe I'm speaking for myself, but I know a lot of people with temper recommends who really aren't that great of people. I'm just going to be straight up and say it. And I know a lot of people that aren't involved in the church, aren't involved in religion at all, that are awesome, that would honestly give you the shirt off their back. And it's like, I hate the judgment game. I think it can really put you in a bad situation where you are playing quasi God. A lot of it puts you in kind of some really sticky situations that I don't think we're really meant to be in. You do give some analysis back to, or some in your criticism of the church, you also give them a way to fix themselves. And I wanted to kind of move on to maybe this next topic where you have said, I can fix the Mormon church. And this is a really good topic to talk about, and to really you set up the how Mormons view prophets and apostles. You kind of set up how I viewed them the same way. I will give a second to that one. And you made this claim as far as how you would fix it. It would be simply stop claiming that church leaders literally speak for God or have exclusive authority that is only found within the church. If this were the case, every problem can simply be chalked up to he was just an imperfect man doing the best he could. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Man, I butchered that a little bit.
No, you actually didn't. So let me tell you, my grandpa, awesome guy, spent most of his life not an active member. In his latest years, he came back, but he always had the best advice, the best counsel for any of his grandchildren, regardless if they were in the church or not. Just a genuinely loving, guy. That's kind of what I'm getting at here with our prophets, with our apostles. These are good guys. There's no doubt about it. But if we can just look at them as good old men who are giving some sound advice, take it or leave it, that's a lot different than what we have been led to believe. And, the tipping point for me, Kai, was when I finally just accepted the fact that these men can lead you astray. And we can look at all of the contradictions that there's been, and the church has different ways that they write it off. They'll say, oh, he was speaking as a man, or now we're hearing, oh, well, that was just a temporary commandment, or,
oh man.
Yeah. So there's lots of different ways the church is trying to deal with the fact that they have said and done some horrible things, whether it's the polygamy stuff, whether it's the race stuff. I mean, I could show you 100 quotes. I could probably show you 500 quotes that the church would be like, oh yeah, we don't accept that as doctrine or as truth. And it's like, so who is to say that what they are saying now is any different? And if we can just say, oh, that's just an old man spouting off when that's appropriate, then fine. But we haven't had that luxury. And you know that as well as I, that everything they have said, we have been led to believe, especially from the prophet, is as if it was God himself or Christ himself speaking. So regarding what I had written, I can fix the Mormon church, to simply stop claiming that they literally speak for God and that they have this exclusive authority.
Yeah, and I have had that same exact thought. That's why I really like this, and we mutually chose to talk about it, is because the church will talk around the idea that these men talk with God, that they, in a way that we can't even understand, they have this relationship with God. And then as time goes on, you see that they really don't. They're really just speaking as men. And I found this really great quote. This is actually Elder Oaks talking in my neck of the woods in Bellevue, Washington, at a stake conference. And this is a really powerful And I think this might be a Freudian slip by Oakes. But I want to play this quote, and hopefully it kind of resonates with people. So he was asked the question, how from a young lady. She said, how can I have the same experience that the Apostle Paul had on the road to Damascus? And so that's the context of this. So for those of you who don't know, that was seeing Jesus on the road to Damascus. She asked, how can I have that same experience? I think she thought she was asking somebody who had that experience. All right, let's go ahead and hear it.
I don't think we'll get it like Paul did on the road to where an angel appeared to him, or where Alma the Younger had that startling experience. The Lord gives a few of those kinds of experiences, and they're recorded in the scriptures to catch our attention and teach us the answer. But I've never had an experience like that. And I don't know anyone among the First Presidency or Quorum of the 12 who had that kind of experience. Yet every one of us knows of a certainty the things that Alma knew.
What are your thoughts on that one, Bishop Hinckley?
So I did have a little bit of hard time hearing him, but I think I heard him say that he has not had the experience, nor basically anyone that he knows, or anyone in the First Presidency. Is that what he said?
Yeah, that's exactly what he said. So this gal's asking him, hey, how can I have this same experience that the Apostle Paul had?
Yeah.
Or Alma the Younger? And he's like, well, I've never had that. I don't think you're going to have that. And no one in the First Presidency or Quorum of the 12. But I know, but they dance around it so much.
They dance around it. That's the problem, Kai. You're hitting on it. Then come out and say it. Because the members think, or they have been taught that they do. And I know that sounds stupid now on this side of things. That sounds childish. That sounds like Santa Claus and things like that. I get it. But when I was in the church, I was quite certain that took place. It, if not regularly, it from time to time.
Yeah, and I suck at impressions, but this is really what plays in the back of my mind when I think about this topic, is a general authority sounding like this. I can tell you in ways that you can't even imagine that Jesus is the Christ. And it's just like, whoa, like ways that I can't even imagine. And I don't know if other people, if that resonates with them, but it's like, I can imagine having a feeling. I can imagine having what I was told in the church, a spiritual prompting, right? I can imagine those things. But we are led to believe that they literally talk with God and then give that message to us, when really that's not really how it works. The Smoots trials, they also kind of outed themselves there too, for those of you Mormon history buffs. And I just think I want to give these guys so much of the benefit of the doubt, but I just don't think they're as honest as they want to come off as, when they kind of mislead people, in that way.
Totally agree. And I think that the honest thing is to come out and sort of like he said there, but that was in a state conference, come out and say it. Look, we do not have any other special access to God or Christ or whoever. We're giving our best counsel.
Yep.
That's fine. I'm okay with that. But it is an abuse. It's actually an abuse of power when they claim what they're claiming. At the conclusion I put on this, I've got some pushback from some people because I use a word that I never say. But I had said, in conclusion, I used to think one of the worst things that you could say is to use the Lord's name in vain, or to say, God damn. But now I realize that is not And to me, that's not using the Lord's name in vain anymore. What is when people claim they're speaking for God. That's using his name in vain, using it in a vain way of claiming you're speaking for him or Christ, but you're not. You're just giving your own ideas. That's, to me, what using the Lord's name in vain is now.
Yeah, and I put in my notes that that is a total mic drop. Like, to weaponize Jesus and God and your interaction with him to get people to stay in your church. Yeah, I mean, that is using the name of the Lord, if you believe in the Lord, in vain. I think that it also takes the church away from having to compete with other churches, having to compete purely based on merit and meritocracy. You put on here that there are many churches that just teach and encourage people to be better, to do good, to forgive, to love one another, to help those in need, all without claiming that they are literally speaking for God. We need to be more like them. I thought that was a great point. That, you know, there are good people out there that aren't making these, as I would see them now, outrageous claims. And yeah, I just really appreciate you bringing light to this. I feel the exact same way. The easiest way to clear your name is to just be honest and tell the truth.
Right.
And that does a lot more than trying to continue to hide behind whatever religious beliefs you have and lies that have been perpetuated for almost 200 years. I think that would do the church a lot of good.
I agree. Along those lines, Kaï, so I had met with the stake president, who's now actually changed, but a few times, and that's actually what initiated my interview with Mormon Stories, was when I was having these conversations with the stake president. Anyways, after talking to him, basically, in my words, he said, "Listen, Brother Hinckley, in my opinion, you're in a lot better place now than you were before. Before, I was so black and white, so the church is true, these guys speak for God." And something you said reminded me of that. So I have, 4 kids. My daughter is now married. My oldest son is now married, and both married non-members, although my daughter's fiance had converted, and then that's another long story.
Oh, there you go.
But
yeah.
Anyways, I remember telling them, because we were talking about how other churches, they don't claim that. I remember telling them, because they kind of got into a 1 week on our church, 1 week with their church, and I remember saying, no, we're not doing that. This is the true church. They are welcome to come with us, but we're not swapping out every week. And I was just so bought in. This is the only true church. There's no reason for us to be going one off, one on. And boy, was I wrong.
Yeah, well, dude, I'm in the same boat. I've been very dogmatic, very rigid, and just said, hey, this is it. There is no other. It's funny. I'm throwing this out of nowhere, but a friend of mine was kind of throwing out what I would consider to be anti-Mormon when I was in the church. And I remember arguing with him on Facebook, and his response back to me and to the other people is, Kaï will never leave the Mormon church. He is so hardcore that you can say anything to him and he will stay in it for the rest of his life. And well, that changed. So I joined, me and you have this similar thing where we haven't talked about this yet, but where we both, from your post, you said, I am damaged goods, or I am spiritually damaged goods. Do you want to talk about that topic and just give a real brief overview of what that post was about and what your feelings are?
So that post actually was one of, I feel like, my most raw moments. Matter of fact, I have a friend. I won't go into too much detail because I don't want to write him out. But I have a friend who who told me that he just bawled and bawled. He had been through some really hard stuff. He had been seeing a therapist. He doesn't have anyone to talk to in his life. And he said, I took that post and I said, this right here. He said, this is my words right here. And he read them word for word. And he felt the same exact way. And, I wrote this one night when I couldn't sleep. It was a Saturday night. My son was getting up the next morning to go to church with his girlfriend, probably at the time. Yeah. And I was just like thinking, man, I used to have all the answers. I used to know where I came from, why I'm here, where am I going. I knew it all. I knew all. Matter of fact, when we had the missionary discussions with both my daughter's husband and my son's now wife, the missionaries would just say, "Oh, let's just let Bishop Hinckley or whatever teach it." They just say, "This stuff, you teach it." I knew all the answers, Kai, and I'm just like, I don't even know where I stand anymore. Like, I am damaged. And so what I was getting at with this, basically saying I don't belong anywhere anymore, because I'll admit that there is a lot of me that is still Mormon and probably will always be Mormon. And I'm proud of it. And along those lines, I had someone message me yesterday. And she was like, hey, you probably don't remember me. I went to high school with you, and I always admired your, you and your church. And I almost, looked into it, but I'm so glad I didn't now. And I was just like so conflicted, because I'm like, what am I doing? I would have, for 44 years, I would have loved that, to have an influence on someone. And now I'm just like, and I'll be honest. How when you're the older brother and someone's picking on your younger brother, and you're like, no one picks on my younger brother except for me, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's kind of how I felt. It's like, it doesn't feel that good to have non-members reach out and say, oh my gosh, your church is so crazy. It's like, I can say it all I want, but I'm still conflicted in that. But anyways, the point of that post was, there's a lot of me that is still Mormon. But there's a lot that is not. And because of that, I really don't know that I would fit in, a local Baptist church. And when I had kind of came out that we weren't going to go to church anymore, and it's been about a year, maybe in a year and a half now, a person down the street was like, oh, great. Our church starts at whatever, 9:00, just assume that, oh, well, he's definitely going to come, to the Baptist church or whatever. And it's like, no, it's not that easy. I don't think that I would fit there, but I also don't think I fit at the Mormon church, because there's so much of it that I do not agree with.
Yeah, there's this idea that, like, I've kind of thrown this out to different people, that if I go to a Mormon church, I am going to be a distraction.
Right.
I'm going to be somebody that says, hey, what is being taught here is historically not accurate,
right,
and is not true.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to be a pariah. I don't want to be somebody that just makes waves. Right. And then at the same time, when I was preparing for this, I've read this post a few times. Listen, I'm not trying to be preachy here, but I was sitting in church this morning, I was sitting in church, and I was looking out, and I looked at where I used to sit. And I remember sitting in this mainstream evangelical church, sitting there and being like, this is all just crap. Like, I don't believe this. That Mormon brain didn't just leave. It wasn't like, oh, great, now I'm going to this other mainstream church. I remember just being for about a year, just being like, this is all garbage, because I had been so wired to have these Mormon beliefs that were just ingrained in me. People would talk about authority and say, you don't have any authority, stuff like that. Right. Where, you're that Mormon doctrine that was built into you for years and years and years. I'll tell you, with doing this project, Jesus for Mormons, there are two comments that I absolutely love. There are the people who reach out and say, hey, this is helping me a lot. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then there are the people who reach out to me and say, everything you're teaching is complete BS. There is no God. I'm like, well, there you go. I guess I reached that person, So I think that it's, Mormons who leave the church, it isn't a direct 1-for-1. It's not a, hey, now you can just I go to an Assemblies of God church. Now you can just go to a Pentecostal church and it's a smooth transition. I believe that our wiring in the Mormon church is, the Bible's not the word of God. It's all of these things that make it so that you couldn't just walk. Well, I used to listen to a prophet and now I'm listening to, Jimbo down the street. I mean, it's a totally different vibe, and it doesn't come easily. And I think that people on both sides should be pretty compassionate. People outside of the church and inside the church should be pretty compassionate and just say, hey, this person's trying to figure out what religion or non-religion looks like for them outside of the church. And that might look like saying it's all crap for a while. That's what it looked like for me. I'm not, that can be a walk that a lot of people take, and people should be a lot less judgmental because of that.
I agree. As part of that damaged goods post, I talk about a conversation I had with my dad. So on the Sunday before I left on my mission, I was up in front of the congregation. I was singing a song, "Oh Lord, my Redeemer." Have you heard that song?
I think so. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been on the church.
Great song. Anyways, and I broke down in tears, couldn't hardly sing. I still have people reach out. Oh, that was the most, spiritual Sunday I've ever had, or whatever. And so my dad basically was like, he'll remind me of that. You remember how you felt, that day or whatever? And he's like, I just hope that no matter what happens, you'll go back to having that same feeling for Christ. And, I write some thoughts on that, and I'll just say the Christ that I had been taught through Mormonism is pretty hard to believe. One that I don't want to go through. I don't want to go through the. I've read it right. I've written about it right here, though. Let me see. Let's see. I said the Mormon Jesus was one that approved of an insanely rich investment corporation while spending relatively little for the poor. He was one that approved Nephi of cutting off the head of a drunk guy. He was one that sent an angel with a drawn sword to command Joseph to start polygamy. He was one that tells the prophets to contradict each other. He's the one that denied the priesthood to the African race. He's the one that denies baptism of gays. I just went through all the things that we're told are important to Jesus. And it's like, I don't believe in that guy anymore. You see what?
Oh man, it makes me cringe. That's why I can't call it the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm like, it's not Christ's church. So, I mean, I can't go down that road, because this is how I view it. Jesus is a weapon. Jesus is used as a weapon in the Mormon church. I'm sorry, that might anger some people, but it is to protect an entity that Jesus is even brought up at all. And sorry, maybe that's me going a little off the rails on that whole thing, but to use Jesus, I guess it kind of goes back to your last point. I mean, using God's name in vain, right? And leveraging the feelings that people have for Jesus bothers me. Okay. You did have some questions that you field a lot since you have left the church. And I wanted to go over those and ask you, how do you wrestle with the spiritual experiences that you had, right? You were a bishop previously, you served a mission, you probably had a lot of interactions with people where you probably felt like you really helped them. How do you kind of wrestle that in general?
Yeah, you're right. That is a question that I've gotten a lot. And honestly, that was one of the questions that I remember wrestling with night after night, and kind of ended up in the emergency room. You and I talked a little bit about that before, just trying to think like, well, what about this? Well, what about that? Well, I felt that this was true back then, and yeah, that's me. I mean, I wrote about that a little bit, about what happened. You know, I'm a pretty healthy guy. I'm into a lot of, you know, active sports, kayaking and construction and things. I've never had any issues with, you know, with stress or mental things, but this whole topic, including what you just asked me, like, oh my gosh, what about that feeling I had at youth conference, you know, or at EFY when my mom had wrote me this letter, and I loved it, you know. So I probably can't articulate quite like I think I've written about it, but I think a few things. I think the church claims some of the spiritual experiences that we have, and they sell them back to you as if they created them.
Preach it, brother.
And so, you know, here's an example. My wife's parents, when they were really young couple, struggling for money and things, they had to sell one of their vehicles in order to build the Mormon church locally.
Okay.
It was a big ask.
Yeah.
And they did it. They sold their car. They gave the money to the church. They built, and they have testified over the years, and I've talked about it in sacrament meeting many times, you know, how the Lord blessed them. You know, they've never needed it. They've had plenty of cars their whole life, and they've never, and the Lord did bless them. But Kaï, he has worked his butt off his whole life in the coal mines.
Oh man.
You know, so what, in other words, yes, I acknowledge God has blessed them, but let's not minimize the fact that he put in the work and he did the work. And it's not for the church to claim that that's their blessing. You know, we blessed him with that. And so it is with each of these spiritual experiences, in my view. You know, it might just be that I'm in tune, you know, and I really love my parents or whatever, and I read a letter from them and I feel good and I get goosebumps. The church can't claim that. That's my experience, right? And I feel like the church will claim it and say, "Yeah, we caused that."
Yeah.
And so that's one aspect of that. And then I go on to talk about elevated emotion and how some things are just not, you know, what you think they are.
Yeah. And I want to talk about that first point that you bring up. And it's this idea that the Mormon church has an exclusive right to your spiritual experiences.
Yeah.
Right. And I've thought about this as well, that anything outside of the church is not really from God. Right? And they'll diminish that. Everything that happens to support the brand of the church or the image of the church or whatever, oh, that's definitely from God. And we need to embrace that. Right. Yeah. And so I think that that can be a really damaging thing for people as well, to believe that everything good happens because of their existence in the church, and everything bad that's happened to them is because of their disobedience. I'm going to put that in air quotes, disobedience. Yeah. And so I think that, you know, people can gaslight themselves into, you know, feeling like they have to stay in the church no matter what. And that in order for them to be connected to God, the church is the only means to do that. And I think that that's also, I mean, we're talking about just hijacking God, relationship with him, you know, if you believe in that. And I just think that that's really a dangerous game that the church is playing in that respect.
Right. So, I said I'm a music guy. I can be listening to a song and just really paying attention to the harmonies of a particular part, and I'll get goosebumps, and that's just kind of something that speaks to me, the way that different chords interact with each other and on top of the music and things. There's lots of things that people will be told, oh, well, that's this or that's that, or you're getting that feeling because of this. When in actuality, it's just, I love music, or whatever. So I just think that we have to be careful when we think we're getting an answer. We might be getting an answer, but it might not be to the question that you think it is, or that someone tells you it is. And so what I titled that was, you don't know anything, which that probably is maybe not the nicest way to put it, but you go to church and it's like, I know this church is true, or I know, the prophet is true, or whatever.
Yeah. And in your topic, I am spiritual damaged goods, you said about your son leaving to go to what I would call a mainstream evangelical church or mainstream church. You said, I just watched him, my son, head out the door and sit and think about the days when I thought I knew what I thought I knew. Yeah. Right. And I think when we, you think back to that little kid that gets up in the beginning of fast and testimony meeting and says, I know, and they go over those 4 or 5 things. And you hear that so much in the church that it becomes ingrained in you that these things. And on the back end of that, when you really find out about the church, you say, oh, I don't think I actually knew that. I don't think
I agree.
I know.
Along those lines, Kai, I'll call him a friend, who attended a Mormon church recently, and it was fast and testimony meeting. I was always told that every testimony at least has these few things, acknowledge God and Christ, whatever, but really talk about Joseph, talk about the Book of Mormon, and talk about current prophets. He sent me a message. He's like, man, you're not going to believe. He's also out of the church.
Sure.
He's like, you're not going to believe this. He says, I didn't hear any of the whole Joseph stuff. He's like, he really, and I've had this kind of feeling recently that the church may be trying to distance a little bit, maybe trying to be a little bit more mainstream, if you will. I wrote about something called The Cross is at a Crossroads. It kind of talked about this and how the cross was always, looked down on in the Mormon church, and now they're kind of accepting it. But anyway, point being, you're right. Some of these testimonies, I know the church is true stuff, I think might be kind of changing a little bit in the last couple of years.
Yeah, maybe they are giving Joseph a break.
We got to give him a break. Yeah.
I shouldn't. But yeah, I think that as things come to light, the church has to adjust. I mean, my whole generation, millennial generation, is out, and they're out because of the truth. I think a lot of them have had spiritual experiences, but now they're out and they're saying, well, where do I go from here? And you briefly touched on this. I don't know if you want to talk about it anymore, but the question of, are you going to go to another church? And I want to back off some of the loading on this, because I realize that every person who's left the church is still working through a lot of, and I don't care if you are the angriest atheist in the world, or, someone who joined another religion, or has peace and through Christianity, or whatever happened on that road. And so I'm not holding you to this, is what I'm trying to say. But why is it, or are you going to go to another church, or what does that look like? Is that a journey? Is that a pause? What does that look like for you?
So I've wrote about this a couple times. One of the ones that comes to mind, I titled "The Truth Has Set Me Free." And if anyone's listening, and they might look for a post like that I named that. But the point of that post was, now that I believe I know or have the truth, which is not what I thought it was before, I am free. So the truth has set me free in a way that I'm free to let my mind, let my heart go wherever it may go. I'm not confined. I'm not in a box. I'm not told you have to believe this. So I've talked with different people of different faiths, people of no faith. A lot of different things have resonated with me. I've talked with people who are really into, what was it I wrote about here? Like healing through natural, like through nature things. Reincarnation. I talked, gemstones and crystals. I've positive energy through these things. I've talked with a lot of different people, and I'm like, you know what? I would have made fun of that before. And I'm not necessarily saying that any of those things that I particularly get on board with, but my mind is open. I'm free to look at anything that interests me. So to answer your question, I haven't been to any other church. And where I feel right now, I feel that if I want to go to church, I would go to the Mormon church. That's the way I feel. But with the caveat that it's not true. The Mormon church is not true. And I know that.
There you go.
But let me finish. Neither is the Baptist church down the street. It's not true in the sense that it's the only place that has the truth, which is what I would have said before about the Mormon church. It's just a place that will hopefully teach you some good things. So I don't know, like you said, you're not going to hope and do that. And I could change that all could change. I'm free to change as I see fit or whatever. But that's my feeling right now. If I wanted to go to church, I would probably go to I don't think they would want me there, but that's probably where I would go. I have nothing against any other church. And I have been in a lot of different churches. I've, through my other job as a videographer with weddings and things, I've been in a lot of Catholic churches, a lot of any church you can imagine in this part of the country. I think they're all great, and I have no problem or trouble or any reason not to go. But in my view, none of those churches are what I would have said before, the true church. Neither is mine. So mine is just as not true as theirs. So I might as well go to mine. That might change. You're laughing. That might change in the future, but that is how I feel right now.
Hey, and I think I actually really appreciate the idea that you said, that would be the Mormon church. I mean, I think that's just an interesting perspective. Like, and I remember thinking that at some point, like, there are things I really love about the Mormon church. It's not true at all. And I think that I think I would cringe every time I heard kind of the truth claims brought up.
Right.
And so that's kind of what led me to the searching deal. But I just think it's really interesting how we're comfortable with, what we grew up with, what we know, and all of those things. And I'll just tell you, my whole motive behind doing this podcast, Jesus for Mormons, is so that people will just consider Christianity after leaving the Mormon church. I put my motives out there. And I'm very outspoken about that. And I think that that's something because honestly, after leaving the church, I was like, no freaking way am I going to another church. I've already I've already gotten out of that, you know? And so, but yeah, I think it's important to say that this is an ever changing thing, and it's ever changing for me too. My thoughts and beliefs after leaving the church are always changing. I have so much that I think of when I think of a quote. I just thought of a quote by Brigham Young today. As I'm just walking up the stairs, I thought about this quote by Brigham. And I'm like, who said that? I was like, oh, it was Brigham Young, right? It's just wired into you. It's just it just becomes an element of you, and it's what you're comfortable with. And so I really don't fault anyone, you know, in this space of saying like, that's what I know, that's what I'm comfortable with. That's where I have a relationship, all of those things. So anyways, I think it's, you know, I wanted to give you some time to kind of give your final thoughts. You know, you have a great audience, a really vibrant, you know, group of people that listen or that read your content. I'm one of them. I'm one of your fans. What kind of final thoughts do you have as we wrap up this interview?
So, for one thing, I've never been a writer. I come from a family of writers, songwriters. My dad and my brother. My daughter, as an English major, is a phenomenal writer. I've never felt like I had any talent or any, you know, any interest really in doing that. But one of the, I guess, the gifts of this truth crisis, I guess it actually is, faith crisis, is that I can, I just love to find 30 minutes or an hour and just think about a topic. Like, what do I think about this? Like, I'm writing some stuff right now. It's called "What's Good Isn't Unique," and what's unique isn't good. Sure. You know, in regards to the church. But point being, this has given me an opportunity to express myself, to find out, hey, I actually do like to write and to put my thoughts on paper or whatever. And people have supported me. And, you know, that feels good. That feels good for someone to say, oh, I love, you know, what you said there. So I appreciate that. However, I would be lying if I said that it hasn't caused quite a rift in the family. All of my family, not all, but most of my family are active, and most of my wife's family is active. And like I said, we come from an area that's very small, and everyone knows everyone. So yeah, I had considered not writing as much, and that's actually why I started the other page that I think you mentioned at the beginning, called The Mormon Moron, which was just, I was thinking, oh, well, this will give me somewhere to write. But I'll tell you why I kind of have not been as active on that page lately. I've had a lot of people, more members and non-members, who have reached out saying, hey, I just want you to know that I'm silently, you know, cheering you on, or I'm with you. I read everything you write. And I realized that to use the other page would probably not reach those same people. And regarding that, can I just read this one part? This is from a friend. I'm not going to name her. She did put this as a public comment on something, but this is really why I have chosen, even though it has caused a rift in the family and all that, this is why I've chosen to be outspoken. Apart from, I just felt like I need to, for my own sanity, just to, you know, to speak the truth. But this is what she said on one of my posts. She says, "It is very painful to leave. We need support. If Nathan and Amy," that's my wife, didn't speak out and let me know I am not alone. I am not kidding you. I was having suicidal thoughts. I wanted to be dead. It's not fun to disappoint your family and break your mother's heart. You need to understand Nathan is not trying to hurt you or the church. He is trying to help people like me. They have saved me. I don't cry every day. I can leave the house without having a panic attack. She goes on. But, you know, Kai, that is, people don't believe this. People don't believe that I feel like I am actually helping people. And that's the truth. I'm not trying to tear the church down. I don't want to take anyone out of the church. I do believe that people should have consent. They should know the things that I feel have been hidden. And so I feel like I should say them. And people like this comment, and I could show you many, many more. And a lot of non-members, just local people who have said, man, you would not believe that how much this is helping me in my own situation. So, you know, I have gotten enough support and love and encouragement from people that I just feel like it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. And I'm one of those people who's read your content and enjoys it and says, like, man, there's so much of this that I thoroughly agree with and is similar to the walk that I've been through. And so I really appreciate that. And I want to thank you, Nathan, for putting your content out there and it coming from a place of love and coming from a place of wanting to help others. And so I appreciate you being on my podcast. Jesus for Mormons, we're here to, talk about my journey of leaving the Mormon church. If you want to watch some more of our content, feel free to hop on over to our channel, Jesus for Mormons. And I really appreciate having Nathan on today, and that we were able to have this conversation. And so, yeah, until next time, I love you guys and appreciate you sticking around for this stream.
Thanks.